Hello, it's Michael from Trike Bike, and today we're going to do a video about the assembly of our FAT Tricycle. The FAT Tricycle is new to Trike Bike and it's proven to be very successful since its introduction, and now it's time to do a great new assembly video for our customers. The FAT Tricycle comes in two boxes. We've got a large box on top which has the rear end assembly, so you've got both tyres, the rear axle, and in the bottom box we've got the main frame and all of the accessories. Now these boxes are 26 kilos each, so they're not light. A lot of customers will need assistance in moving them around for assembly. So we'll just get this one down and we'll have a look inside. Okay, I've just cut the straps off this box, so now we can open it and have a look inside. These boxes are 1 centimetre thick, so it's the toughest, strongest cardboard you'll ever see. And there's a lot of staples here holding the boxes together. They can rip into your skin very easily. So I ask you to either remove them or be very careful around them. In this situation, I'm going to rotate this box around. I'm going to fold this down and I'm going to push it up against the garbage bin here, so no one can walk into the staples as we're unpacking. Okay, so in here we've got baskets, we've got brackets for the rear mudguards, we've got rear mudguard and front mudguard, and the whole rear assembly. To remove this from the box, I'm just going to cut a couple of cable ties. So that's our front basket. This is our rear basket and mudguards. A lot of this packaging material we actually recycle here. We don't normally throw it out. Now if we just have a look inside this box, you'll see down here on the frame is a cable tie which is mounted to the frame here. I just cut that off, and this bag here is the chain and the bolts that holds the whole rear assembly onto the main frame. Really good thing with this tricycle is that 90% of it's already assembled. It can be a bit hard to get it out of the box because there is packaging on the sides to stop any damage. I'm just going to take that off now. The other side's already fallen off. I'm going to flip it over to the right orientation and I'll bring it over and put it on our stand. Now it's important I talk about a few things in this situation. Here we've got a workbench, we've got our stands, and that makes everything really easy. If you don't have stands, you can use things like a milk bottle crate or something to rest the rear end on. If you're trying to do it just on the ground, you'll end up with really sore knees and a really sore back fairly quickly. So once it's on these stands, it can sit there by itself. Now we can go and open the other box and remove the parts from there. Okay, here we are with our second box. This has got the main tricycle assembly in it. Just cut away the straps. On this box there's 3 straps. You can use a knife, or in my case I prefer to use side cutters. We end up in the same situation as we did before. We've got to open the box and really be aware of the staples. Okay, I've got that box open. Again, you can see these aggressive staples. I'm going to fold it over and push it towards the garbage bin so it can't damage anybody. The first thing I'll take out of the box is the toolkit and all of the hardware for the tricycle. We'll take this over to the bench and we'll unload everything and get it all separated. Okay, here's a bit of cardboard I've cut out of one of the boxes previously. I like to use the cardboard on top of the bench because it keeps everything nice and clean. In this bag here, we have the chain. As part of the chain are 2 link assemblies, and then we have 6 bolts with nuts, and these bolts have the hexagon head, and these 6 bolts are used to attach the rear frame to the main frame. Okay, in this box it's like Christmas morning. We've got our pedals, we've got our light, we've got some cable ties, we've got our brackets for the front and rear mudguards, some more brackets for the front mudguard. We've got some nuts and bolts, which is our hardware kit. We've also got a full toolkit. So we've got all of the correct spanners, all of the correct Allen keys. We've got everything that's needed to completely assemble the tricycle. These are fairly good quality products, so they'll probably sit in your toolbox after you've finished the assembly process. I'm going to leave into this box, because we don't need them for now, the user manual, the user guide, which shows you the operation of the tricycle. And lastly, we've got the charger. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we've got everything unpacked now. So here is our chain with our connecting links. There's two parts of that. We have our front headlight. We have 4 brackets here, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're for the rear mudguards. And we have 1 bracket for the front mudguard. Over this side, we've got the bolts that are used to attach the frame of the tricycle to the rear axle assembly. And we have a selection of cable ties, which will be used during the assembly. Here we've got our pedals, and because it's a commercial tricycle, we have metal pedals, and they're really a good quality pedal. These funny looking things here are brackets which hold on the front mudguard to the front forks. Going along the back here, we have, starting here, we have bolts which hold on the rear basket assembly to the rear frame. And of course these bolts have a washer each side and a nylock nut at the bottom to stop everything falling off. Here we have other bolts which are used during the assembly. Down here, these are used for attaching the rear mudguards to the rear mudguard brackets. And in this case here, these are for the rear mudguards themselves. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. These are washers which are used. And this funny looking rubber thing here is actually an insert which goes into the top of the handlebar. So when we finish the assembly, that's the last thing that goes in. These are all the parts that we need for assembly of the tricycle. At Trike Bike, we like to recycle and recover what we can from our packaging, because being as low impact to the environment is really important for us. And one thing that I really like to recover from our fat tricycles is the cable ties, because they're using, to hold everything together, some quite large cable ties which can be reused, and it will save you about $5. I've used them for everything. So let me show you how to recover them and not waste them by cutting them off. So we like to recover our cable ties, and as you can see, there's a serration on one side and it's smooth on the other side. So the serration is actually what holds the cable tie tight. In here is a little lever which pushes into the serration. So I'm going to use a small flat-bladed screwdriver and push it down, and I've levered open the position, and now we can just feed the cable tie through. So what we've now ended up with is a cable tie that can be used again and again, and these are about $5 to $8 each in Australia, and there's about 10 of them in the box assembly. So I really strongly suggest that you recover these and reuse them in the future. Okay, you can repeat that process the 8 times or 10 times and recover all of those cable ties. We're now ready to lift some stuff out of the box. So here we've got a front mudguard. Now we're going to lift out the front tyre. So very gently lift it out of the box. On one side of the front wheel, they have a little plastic grommet just to protect the nut here, so you can dispose of that. I'll flick it around to the disc brake side, and here you'll see there's quite a large cover. It's the same ones as they use on the back wheels. Again, to protect it, they can go in the bin. And then getting it ready for the next step of the assembly, we can unwind these almost till they fall off. So I can see that wobbling now. I can do the same on the other side, and that's just doing a little preparation for the upcoming assembly. I'll pull out the seat and seat post. The frame is cable tied to the handlebars, so they'll come out with it. And you've also got the battery in place. You can make this job a little bit easier by taking the battery out and you'll find the key for the battery normally on the front handlebars. So I'm just going to reach in and lift it out. I'm just going to use some cutters to remove these cable ties here. These are small ones and they're not worth recovering, to be honest. Now if we look on the side of the frame here, we can see the 3 bolt holes. So 1, 2 and 3, and there's another 3 on the other side, and that is what we're going to align to the rear axle assembly. So once that's together, the tricycle starts to take its shape fairly quickly. I'm just going to remove the bubble wrap on the rear of the tricycle because you need to have really good clear access to it, and you can cut the bubble wrap off with scissors or a knife. I prefer not to do that. I use the cable cutters because I know I'm not going to scratch the paint finish, which on the Sobowo FAT Trike Bike is exceptional. That's one thing I'll say, that this manufacturer does a fantastic job of the paintwork and protecting the paintwork from the factory to eventual delivery to our customers. Okay, to attach the main frame assembly to the rear frame, we use 6 bolts, 3 on each side, and I've prepared these already by taking off the nut and also one of the washers. So we're left with a bolt with 1 washer. It's important that you have this prepared because if you're doing it by yourself, it is a pretty big handful. We're going to lift the frame assembly from the box. To do that, grab the forks and the rear of the trike frame assembly, and we can bring it around and temporarily rest it on everything that's here. And this is where you need a few sets of hands if you can, if you have someone to help you. We now need to lift up and connect the rear frame to the main axle assembly. So we have 1 bolt in, our 2nd bolt in, and our 3rd bolt in. I'm just going to race around to the other side and put in the other 3 bolts. It's a bit hard for me to see here, but 1 bolt. I'm now going to go and just loosely connect a washer and a nut to each of those bolts. We're going to do them up finger tight. The next step is to remove all of the remaining packaging and remove the battery so it can go off and get charged while we're completing the assembly. Okay, we've pretty much unwrapped everything now. All the bubble wrap is gone except with the rear brake calipers. There's a couple of cable ties we need to get rid of. One is on top here of the top of the gooseneck or stem. We'll remove that off. And the other one is down on the handlebars where I'm going to now remove the keys. I'll just unclip it, remove the key, and we can take the battery off for charging. So to get the battery off, we push the key in. It's on the off position. So we push it in and rotate it to the left, and that unlocks the battery, and it can now be removed from the frame. Sometimes they're a little bit stiff, especially when they're new, but that's now come off, and we're going to take it to the charger, plug it in and charge the battery. Okay, we're going to attach our handlebars to the main stem of the tricycle. So we'll just get it up and slide it down. We can leave all of this loose for now. We don't need to tighten it. But let me just take that off and show you what's inside this stem. So inside the stem is a bolt with a 5mm Allen key head. That's really important because you need to bolt this stem onto that stem, and you do that using the bolt. So for now we'll just slide it down and leave it there like that, and we'll come back to that setup a little bit later. Alright, there's 2 ways of connecting the chain. First of all, you obviously put it around the sprockets, which I'll show you in a few minutes, but we need to join these two end links together once it's already on the tricycle. Okay, we're going to join our chain to the joining link. So to do that, we put both ends of the chain over the link. We use this special plate and just gently hold it down. And you'll see here that if you put it on in its normal position, it won't click into place. There's not enough room. So you need to basically bend the chain ever so slightly, and you can flex it. You just heard it pop on, and now it's in the on position, and it's secure for years of operation. The other way of doing it is to use the proper chain tool pliers. So these pliers go in to the link, and again gently squeeze it all together, and you can remove the fitting just the same as you would if you did it on the tricycle. And that's what we're going to do now. Okay, we're going to connect our chain. So we'll pass it through underneath the frame, around the rear axle, back through the chain, and we position everything on the front sprocket. So I'm just going to go underneath here, bring everything around, and because we're not on the back sprocket, we've got enough room to join the chain together without it pulling like crazy. So we'll just connect the chain. I'm going to just flex it gently and put on this pin plate. Okay, we'll now put our chain on the rear sprocket. You'll only do so much of it by hand. Once it's there, you can just rotate the pedal crank a little bit, and that'll bring the chain all the way over the sprocket. But you'll notice there's a lot of slack in the chain. This gets taken out when we do up the frame. Okay, in your toolkit will be a 17mm spanner and a large Allen key. Here we do it with tools because we do a lot of trike assembly. We need to do it as quickly as possible. So here all I'm going to do is take up the slack. So I'm just going to tighten up these nuts a little bit, each of the bolts. Just going to loosen this one. It's been over tightened just a fraction. I still want everything to be nice and loose in between the frame and the rear axle assembly, because now I need to adjust it. Depending on what position that I bolt this together will mean the chain is either too loose or too tight. Now, what is too loose or too tight? Basically, if you draw an imaginary line between the rear of the back sprocket and the bottom of the front sprocket, you should be able to lift the chain up 1 centimetre. Now you can see here we're lifting it up about 5 centimetres or even more. So what that means is the first time we go out riding, the chain is going to fall off. So I'm going to actually push the frame away from the rear axle assembly, and you can see when I did that, the chain instantly tightened up. So I've gone a little bit too far. Just check again. Okay, so when I'm happy with the chain tension, I'm just going to tighten 1 bolt on each side. Now let's have a look. Still too loose. So I'm going to have to loosen those bolts again and just pull back a little bit. This is about the tension you're looking for. No tighter and no looser. You just want to have that sort of 1 centimetre movement in the bottom of the chain. We're now going to fit the front wheel, but there's 2 bits of preparation we need to do first. We need to remove this pinky coloured piece of plastic. This goes between the 2 disc pads on the sides here and stops them from closing up during shipping. That way you'll be able to get the front wheel in. The other thing we need to do is to lift up the forks and remove this special spacer that again stops any fork damage during shipping. We almost prepared our front wheel earlier, so now I'm just going to remove the final parts of the assembly. So I've just removed now the nut, a washer and a special safety washer off the left hand side, and this is the left hand side because it's got the disc brake on it. The disc caliper is also on the left hand side. I'll turn the tyre around And again, I'll go through the same process. I'm going to remove the nut, the large washer, and the safety washer. Now, if you look closely at both sides, you'll see this washer here has a special tab on it. And that goes into what we call a fork dropout. So at the moment, these are pointing upwards. And that's not the correct way for it to go into the tricycle. We need to rotate it around so the cable and that dropout is pointing downwards. And we'll check on the other side. It's also pointing downwards. So we're now in a position where we can lift up the frame and put the front wheel into the forks. This is an ideal time to find someone that can help you lift it, because it can sometimes be hard to lift the forks and juggle the front wheel and also align the disc into the brake caliper itself. I'm just going to lift it up now. I'm juggling it around so the disc is going into the caliper. The dropouts are correctly positioned, and we can see that the little tab is showing on the bottom of the axle there. I'm now going to apply the safety washer. This tab goes into the hole in the forks. Make sure that's positioned correctly. Then we go on with a large washer, and then we go on with the nut. And we do exactly the same on the opposite side. Okay, you want to make sure that the wheel is centrally located in the forks. So you've got the same amount of gap both sides. When it is centrally located, I always push down on the forks. So there's a bit of downward pressure and we can tighten them up. These are 19mm size nuts. And we'll then go on to connect the cables. Okay, to connect these cables, you need to align the arrows. So there's an arrow on both the male and female socket. So you need to line them up, and you have to push them in until it touches a little ridge. So I've just managed to push that in all the way. Okay, we're now ready to attach the cable to the frame, in this case the fork. So we'll go through this little feature here, which is made for a cable and a cable tie. And we'll join that up together and pull it tight. Now with these, you don't need to over tighten them, so you don't need to pull them really, really hard, because it can actually damage the cable a little bit. So my preference is to make them firm, but not too tight, and then snip the excess off using a nice pair of side cutters. It's important to identify which pedal goes on which side, and on the end of each pedal there's usually a stamping which shows left and right. So this is a well go pedal, so it'll have W for well go and then L for left, R for right. Just to double check here before we start, I've got the L marked on the pedal. I'm on the left hand side of the tricycle, and importantly we've got a left hand thread on this pedal. So normally when you tighten things, it tightens to the right, so clockwise. But on a bicycle, the left-hand pedal is always anti-clockwise. So we can just start it off by turning it, and then we go at the end for a 15mm spanner, which we've got here, and we can continue tightening till it's really quite firm. Okay, we've got the right-hand pedal this side. It's a right-hand thread, a conventional thread, so we can just start it off. Sometimes they can be a little hard to get started, so you just keep working it very, very gently. So that's taken now. Because what you're doing is you're screwing hardened steel into softer aluminium. So that's gone as far as we'll go finger tight, and I'll just finish it off now with the tool. Okay, we're just going to fit our seat. I'll just put it down to a generic setting at the moment, and then we can lock the clamp back. That'll stop the seat from moving. Okay, now we're going to use a combination of 4mm, 5mm and 6mm Allen keys. So the first thing we do is insert the 5mm down into the stem, and we need to tighten this bolt up nice and firm. So I'm putting a fair bit of effort into that, making it nice and tight. That holds the front fork assembly together, but you can see that I can still move the handlebars. So now I'm going to go for the 4mm, and I'm going to tighten a couple of bolts on this side. Now these bolts have proper torque settings which are shown in the manual, but for now I'm just nipping them up so we can complete the assembly. Now finally we have a 6mm Allen key. Goes into this part of the gooseneck, and I'll swing it up to a position that is probably comfortable for 90% of our customers. Again, this needs to be really nice and firm, and this bolt is something you should check after about the first 2 weeks, because it'll loosen up a little bit. So you just make it nice and tight, and then it will last the rest of the life of the tricycle. We're now going to remove these 4 bolts here which hold the front basket on. So now we're going to fit the front basket. You make sure all of the cables are away from the bolting area, otherwise you'll crush the cables. And just align it firstly by hand, get it positioned, and get a couple of the bolts in just to hold it secure in place. Now before we go too crazy and tighten everything up firmly, there's nothing worse than a tricycle with a crooked front basket. So I use a little spirit level, but you may use a friend that's helping you assemble a tricycle, and ask them to stand back 4 or 5 meters and make sure the basket is level. In this case, because I'm by myself, I'm going to just use a spirit level. Just get it roughly in position, nip up one of the bolts. It's gone sideways a little bit, so I'm just going to touch it. That's good. Tighten it there. Perfect. We can now go ahead and tighten these bolts fully. So here we're just mounting the front light onto the front of the basket frame. Can be a bit fiddly to grab hold of the bolt, but it doesn't need to be done up too tight. Okay, we've got to attach the 2 red cables together, but there's not really enough room, so I'm going to undo the Velcro cable swage here, just undo the cable tie and let the front light fall out underneath. And we'll just cable tie the cluster of wires again, but I've left out the front headlight in this case. Again, when you cable tie, not too tight, just pull it up so it's firm. We're going to wrap this Velcro swage back in place, and now we've got more than enough room to go and connect the front cable. Now these will only go in one way. There's a little slot at the top, a little pin on this, so just gently move it around until you can feel it. And you can also see, if you look closely, there's 2 arrows which help with the alignment. We then need another cable tie to secure this in place, so I'm going to go through the bottom of the basket here. Just pull the cable back, and again pull it tight, and we'll cut it. While we're finishing off the front end, I'm going to fit the front mudguard. These are a new mudguard made for the Australian market that covers a lot more area, so you can ride through water without too many problems of getting wet. So we just position this through on the back of the tyre area. We can push it down underneath the support. Okay, we're going to attach the front mudguard. Now I've just put the bolts through here as a washer on one side, nut on the other, and you can lift up the mudguard to suit the clearance that you require. So I'm just going to nip it up slightly to start with. For where I'm looking there, it's not looking too bad actually, so I might leave it in that position and I'll just tighten it and that's done. Okay, these are the fork clamps which go onto the forks. It's necessary just to cut off these lumps on the side because they're there for a different bicycle. Okay, so we're going to use this fork clamp and one of the bolts, and we're going to position this through so we can mount the mudguard holder. So we're going to go through with our bolt. We're going to have to move some of this cabling so we can go through without damaging it. We're going to put on the large washer and a nut. And it can be a bit fiddly in here. Your fingers are always too fat to fit in little places. So just take your time, you'll probably drop it a few times. Just like I did then. Oop, now the washer's come off, that's okay though. We can just move the wheel around a little bit, that'll give me a little bit more room. And repeat the exact same steps on the other side. We're just going to now connect the rear brake calipers to the frame so we can prepare everything by pulling off the plastic covering. I've unpackaged the brake calipers and I'm pulling them backwards towards the end of the trike, the back of the trike. You'll see one is obviously shorter than the other. So the long one goes on the right hand side because it starts off on the left hand side of the frame and will go over to the right hand side. So I'll just pull it loosely through where the hose has got to go, and on the left hand side I'll do the same there. So I'm going to remove the spacer for the brakes. I'm also going to remove the two 5mm hex nuts. Okay, so we're going to now position the caliper over the disc and down into the frame area where it gets attached. Now what's important to know, it's going to be hard for me to show you, but there's a little fibre washer. Now this fibre washer goes between the disc brake area and the frame itself. So you need to be sort of Houdini to get it to stay in place, but it worked perfectly that time. And that fibre washer just acts as a little spacer and it takes some of the vibration out of the brakes. You have one of them in each position. These get tightened up fairly firm. And you'll notice if you looked at these when we removed them, you'll see that they've got a blue coating on the threads. That's actually a thread sealer that'll lock it into position. So I'm going to do the same over this side. Repeat everything again on the opposite side. Okay, so we've got some cable tie features that we need to go through to secure our brake hose. So I'm going to put the cable tie through it, pull it through, we'll go around the cable and we'll pull it nice and tight. And we'll do the same on this middle one and work our way back using cable cutters, wire cutters, just trim it off. I'm going to go around the left hand side of the tricycle and I'm going to do the same. So we've already got the cable for the rear lights going through that feature, so I'm just going to cut that off. You should only have one cable tie at a time feeding through there. So we can pull everything tight. And we'll go down to the frame and mount it down here. We've also got our brake light that needs to be connected. So again, just rotate that fitting slowly till you can feel it click and then you'll push it push it in, and we can secure everything down to this bottom cable tie mounting point. What you want to do here is to keep everything nice and neat and away from anywhere that it can get caught in the chain or any other system. Now we've got this tightened up, I'll move my hands away, and you can see here we've got all of our cables. They're all away from the chain position. They're firmly mounted, they're not going to go anywhere, so that's perfect. Now with the mudguards, it's important to know there's a front and a back. So if you look at this one side by side, you'll see this slot is much lower than this slot here. So that means this is the front and that's the back. So when they go on the bike, they'll be mounted with the two shorter sections to the front of the bike. We now have two brackets which get mounted to the rear basket, and you'll see that one end has got a flat cutout on it and the other end is a round cutout. So what we do, the state of having everything the same, we put the flat cutout to the back of the bike. Okay, we're going to mount these brackets onto the basket. So again, the flat end goes to the back of the basket. Now how can you tell which is the back? It's because we've got a door on the back of the basket that opens and closes. So what we're going to do now is mount these brackets to the basket frame. These can be a little bit fiddly, however we do it electronically using the correct tools. You can see how quick it is. The secret is to keep everything loose until you have everything on and aligned. That one's a bit tight. So I'm going to pull it to the up position and then tighten everything up. From here I'm going to mount the brackets which hold the mudguards into place. So again, I'll line it up. Sometimes you get a bit of powder coat in there and it will actually make it quite difficult to put the bolt in. Again, lift the tab up. That'll give you the most amount of clearance to the tyre. They're nice and firm. We can do the same at the other end. So another 2 bolts and the bracket. You can see once the powder coat comes out, the bolts go straight in. Okay, so that's our brackets mounted to the basket. Now all we need to do is to mount our mudguards to the brackets, and remember we look at them to work out which is the front and which is the back. So this is much longer, so that goes to the back. I've got a bit before myself by not getting the hardware ready, but I'll get the washers and the nuts that we need. So it's finger tight. I'll just leave it there for now and I'll go to the other end. Now there's a lot of movement in the rear mudguard and you want it to be positioned correctly. So for now, just do it up lightly like that, and we can move it when it's the final assembly and position it so it's perfect. We'll repeat these steps on the other side. Okay, the easiest part of the whole build is to put this onto the back of the tricycle. So we just lift it up and lower it down gently. Once it's in place, we can grab some of the bolts and nuts. Okay, so we're just going to put some of these through. So we're going to put these 4 bolts through. Just move the frame around to get the hole position correct. So what we've got here is a washer, the bolt, and then on the bottom of these goes a washer and a nut. Okay, if we just go around the back of it, I'll just put these chains on. The Sobowo FAT Tricycle is it's quite nice, and it's got a little tailgate you can put down, and you can also put some little chains on there so they go on both sides, and that'll restrict it opening all of the way, so it'll only go down to there. They rattle around a fair bit while you're using them, so you can leave them on or off. It's up to you, but when they go on there, just get a pair of pliers, just squeeze them closed. That way they won't open and fall off while you're riding. We now want to just check the alignment of the mudguards to the wheels, and in this case the front one is perfect. And the back one could probably come over just a little bit, so I'm just going to loosen it. Bring it over a little bit, tighten it up, and we'll tighten up the front. Now it's in its final position. I'll do the same on the other side. This one's out by a fair way, so I'm just going to loosen it, bring it over a little bit. Let me have a look at that. That's pretty good. So I'll just tighten that up. And we'll go to the front. It's out by a bit. Should be able to just pull it over gently. That's it. Okay, we're getting to the end of the build. So the battery's been on charge now for the time it's taken us to assemble. So I'm just going to put the battery back into the bike. If you've watched any of our other videos, you'll know that we tip the seat up. To release it, I'll grab the battery and we'll line it up on the rail and slide it down gently. Remember, don't let it fall from any height, just let it go down and restrict it crashing into the bottom, because you will break out the battery pack base. So we just need to do a couple of final adjustments on the steering to make sure the steering is quite okay. And I need to put some air in the tyres. So of all of our bikes, we tend to run about 16 psi as a good starting point. This one's got 3.3. They don't, of course, blow them up all the way for shipping. 16.2 is close enough for me. Remember, don't fill these tyres at a gas station because their pumps put in so much pressure so quickly you can explode your tyre. Okay, one last check is I'll pull the bike forward. To get it in a straight line, I'll put my legs either side and check the front handlebars. These are out by quite a way, so I'm just going to move them back until I've got them in perfect place. I will now get the 4mm Allen key and just tighten up these clamps. These clamps are quite important because they stop your steering from going sideways. I'm going to change that out for a 5mm Allen key. I'm going to check the bolt for the head stem and make sure it is nice and tight. Now you can remember at the start I mentioned we had this little black thing. Here it is here. That's the last thing we do on the trike, and put it in this little opening here to stop water going in there and causing any issues with rust or other problems. So I'll just turn it on. It's powering up. I'm going to turn the lights on. So we've got a headlight on at the front. Our tail light is working. And our brake light is working on both handlebars. So just a few adjustments here. I'll just move the handlebars up, which for my customer will be a bit more comfortable because I know they're taller. So once we've locked that up, I'm just going to lock the screen so it won't move. I want to make sure it's at the right angle to the customer. You don't need to over tighten these, just nip them up. That way if you ever get into an accident and say you fall forward and it hit the screen, the brackets will just rotate around rather than the screen breaking. Well, that's really it. We've now got everything assembled. I'll need to go out and do a test ride and make sure there's no other minor adjustments need to be made. But with the Sobowo tricycles, they're pretty good out of the box. In fact, I don't think I've ever had to do anything other than move the handlebars. So, of course, if you've got any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us through our website. Using email as our preferred method. You should be able to assemble your tricycle. You should do it in probably 2 hours maximum, and it should bring you many, many years of enjoyment and safe riding. Anyway, that's it. I'm off to do a test ride.